Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Tony Saldanha, who is the author of Why Digital Transformations Fail. Tony, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Mike.
You're welcome, and I'm excited to talk about this because I know that digital is so huge. Digital transformation is an important thing, and then I really want to know why they fail, because if we can learn that, we can understand the roadblocks to avoid. But before we get into that, give us a little bit of your background. What is your corporate world that you came out of? Because I know that so many people have this background, and then they learn bits and pieces and nuggets, and then they bring that into their work. So give us a little bit of your background, and then what led you to this work you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. I spent 27 years at Procter Gamble in their IT and shared services organizations. At P&G, that's a very large organization. That's about $2.5 billion. And I had the a distinct opportunity of having led that in every region of the world. And prior to that, I had a few other jobs in the IT industry. But most importantly, these were all incredible opportunities working around the world, helping transform not just technology, but also culture in very different circumstances. And that's how over a period of time it became very, very evident that, there was a science to how this thing gets done. And then you kind of mix that up with the fact that we're in the midst of an industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, that is all about transformation, and this becomes suddenly very relevant.
I think that it's so amazing when you come out of a large corporate background that way. And did you find yourself at times going, boy, if this was a smaller, more nimble company, we should be doing this and that, but I know I could never run it up the flagpole to get that approved?
Yes, exactly. It sounds like you've been there, done that,
Yep.
Mike. Here's the reality. Even in the absolute best large enterprise, whether it's private sector or public sector in the world, the fact is that large organizations do have inertia that is built into how they operate. And that's the reason why, quite frankly, large enterprises, including Procter Gamble, which has been around for 85 years, is still around, right? Because they do things methodically and they do things extremely well. So even in the best corporation, this is reality. The challenge in today's world is how do you maintain that stability and yet disrupt yourself just like a startup? And that is, it is conflicting by its very nature. But the good news is that, there is a role for both types of capabilities. There is a role for acting nimble when it comes to innovation, and there is a role for, acting very, very stable when it comes to operations. And that's really the trick around how to ensure that digital transformations become successful.
Yeah. Oh, boy, that's pretty huge. We could probably talk for about 4.5 more hours on just that one phrase alone about being nimble and then making it stick, because the problem I find so much with the small to mid-sized businesses and entrepreneurs is they see a strategy that should work, might work, and they try it in for about 10 minutes and then, or really, like 10 days or 10 weeks, but it doesn't work right off the bat, gangbusters, but they don't stick with it long enough.
Yeah, and that is a little bit of a challenge. And while that's true in small and medium enterprises, it also is true in large enterprises too. Here's the reality of the situation, right? No organization, whether small or large, has the resources to, experiment endlessly, especially when it comes to, really high risk, high return type of ideas. And so this is really the trick, which is to figure out, when to kill an idea and when to persevere. One of the things that I learned in my work, not just with Procter & Gamble, but now with much of the work that I do with both ends of the spectrum, so the Fortune 100 companies as well as really, really small startups, is that you have to have a very clear success criteria. And I define that success criteria in terms of a financial Wall Street type of returns, right? And you have to have a very clear timeline by which you say, if I'm able to achieve this goal by this date, I will persevere. If not, I will pivot and I will change ABC, right?
Yeah.
But the key is that you can't really get hung up on one idea alone. And this is a large reason why digital transformations fail. Most organizations, whether small or large, they kind of get fixated on one idea, right? They say, hey, I'm going to make this up from, having a physical store to online. And this is the technology, this is the capability, this is my approach, right? And either I succeed or I die trying. Well, see, the problem with that particular approach is that, you're leaving yourself no room to do this thing which startups do extremely well, which is called pivot, right? And so what I talk about in my book is that, set a goal, be extremely clear about it, but then have, just like, venture capitalists do, they have a portfolio of different ideas and different companies, and they're willing to have, 70, 80, 90% of them die, but then one of them is going to be successful, and that more than pays for all of the losses that you have. So in the case of the example that I had made up, right, so you want to go from physical to online, you have to have the ability of having multiple ideas, multiple approaches, each one of them extremely targeted in terms of what it achieves. And then it's okay to kill most of them as long as you have others that are still going to get you to that goal. That is really the essence of how to make your digital transformation successful.
Yeah, so now let's flip the switch and go over to why do digital transformations fail? And I know that's the topic of your book, and we could talk forever on that. But what would you say is one of the top one or two reasons why they're failing?
There are two reasons why digital transformations fail. One is goal setting, and then the second is execution. So just to back up a little bit, about 4 years ago when I was still with Procter Gamble, I had the opportunity to meet up and interview 100 different executives from venture capitalists, peer companies, startups, so on and so forth. And among other things, I talked about how do you define digital transformation?
Yeah.
And this is going to be a little funny, Mike, but, you expect the answer here, which is I got 100 different answers, right? All the way from, oh, my God, don't even, spend time with it. This is all hype. I remember we had digital watches in the 1970s, all the way to the other end of the spectrum where people are like, oh, yeah, no, this is real. I mean, those robots, they're going to come for our jobs. So, and I'm exaggerating, but not by much. But the fact of the matter is that digital transformation does mean different things to different people because it's a frequently used word, digital, right? So one of the first things that I did was try and put this into a spectrum and define digital transformation in terms of both the corporate and public sector fourth industrial revolution. So if you're an organization that's been extremely successful, 5 years, 10 years ago in the third industrial revolution era, and you're trying to basically rewire yourself, like in the example I was giving earlier, a physical store to, online, you're going to have to rewire yourself. Digital transformation is that rewiring so you're successful in the fourth. And then I define 5 stages of evolution all the way from stage 1, which is you automate, you automate how you do your books or, how you do your selling, so on and so forth. And stage 5 at the other extreme is you change the DNA, including the organization culture, so that you're constantly evolving, right? So that's one reason. Most organizations, when they talk about digital transformation, they're not exactly clear about what they are after. The second reason why they fail is very simply execution. So I was talking earlier on a few minutes ago about how people follow one idea off the cliff, right? And they do that because in the industry, digital transformation is executed using project management, which comes from IT and manufacturing and other backgrounds, right? And it really needs to be that plus something else, which is the risk-taking and the multiple ideas iteration, which you actually have to learn from venture capitalist methodology, right? And so that's the other reason why I think the methodology being not quite evolved enough, that's the other reason why digital transformations fail.
When you were mentioning execution, it reminds me I've heard and said for years that there's a big difference between strategy and tactics and execution, because you have to have a strategy first. It's almost like saying, ready, fire, aim. We have to be ready, then you have to aim, and then you have to fire. Well, if you don't have a strategy, you don't know where you're going. So we know that, but then you have to actually have the tactics to achieve the strategy, the goals, and then finally, right past that's all wonderful. You can have that strategy and know the tactics, but then if you don't do anything with them and execute, what good is it? It's like having the cure for some horrible disease and not telling anybody.
Very well put, Mike. And this is at the end of it. Digital transformation is just an industry, which, by the way, is becoming very, very large, right? I mean, the total spend in digital transformation in 2019 globally is going to be 1.7 trillion. That's with the T, dollars, right? So it's very, very big, and that's understandable because we all know that we're all going to have to rewire ourselves, whether it is, you're a large company or you're a government or, you are a nonprofit sector, right, to use digital technology. So it's understandably a big area. It's the number one priority for boards. Now, having said that, it's also a relatively new industry, right? And so one of the other insights that I had about 4 or 5 years ago was that, just like with every other industry, I'm a geek in the airline aviation era. During the First World War, takeoff and landing of aircraft was essentially a little bit of a crapshoot. I mean, you had to be skilled. You took off on a wing and a prayer, as they say, right? But the Second World War, that became a prescripted science of how you do stuff, right? I think digital transformation is probably closer to the First World War aviation era than the second. And so, part of what I think is happening, including the work that I'm doing here, is to try and bring in what you were just describing, a little bit of science around it. What is your strategy? What is your goal? And then, what's your checklist of executions?
Yeah. And then do you also provide guidance, coaching, consulting to firms where you would come in and help them assess what they need and then lay out the tactics and then also provide for them some guidance and even consulting with getting them executed?
World now. So I founded an organization called Transformant. And part of what I'm trying to do through that is to bring to life, some of these experiences over 3 decades. And I do a couple of things, both ends of the spectrum to help organizations create the strategy. But then at the other end, on the execution, I've created a checklist of activities that helps people and organizations figure out, how to go about the book, so to speak. But again, this particular digital transformation is not just about what your own organization can do. It's also about how do you make the world work for you without too much money. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but if you kind of think about what, Google and others do, right? They're very, very good at hosting seminars, at crowdsourcing ideas, getting some of the best information from the world, and then distilling from those hundreds of thousands of ideas into maybe 30 projects. This is literally true that Google X, which is the organization that does driverless cars and other kind of cool stuff, is that distilling of how do you get the world to give you ideas, and then how you go down by killing most of those until you come up with 30 really, really big ideas. And And so what I also do through Transformant is help organizations tap into an ecosystem.
Yeah. Oh, that's even better because it's not just here's some advice, read the book, bye, but it's here's some advice, let's work on it together, and then let me help you tap into some of the Rolodex context that I've got to help you accelerate even faster.
Yes. No, absolutely. And that again, that's a lesson that I learned during my last 4 years at Procter Gamble. We had at Procter Gamble. By external benchmarks, the best-in-class organization in IT and global business services or shared services, which is essentially, back offices in finance and HR and supply chain, so on and so forth, right? And then the wicked problem, so to speak, that I was concerned about is then how do you take what is considered to be best in class and then improve on that again? Because, we all know that in large companies, we may think we're good, but your real competition is not coming from another large company. It's coming from the startup around the corner that, just does things 10 times better, right, in terms of speed and efficiency. And so that really drove me down this path of ecosystems because it doesn't matter how big you are. If most of your information is coming from other large companies or your own people, that's kind of narrow. So you're going to have to create and tap into this external ecosystem. So that is indeed one of those things that I prescribe and help, my companies. My clients do include, as I was saying, everybody from small and medium enterprises to Fortune 100, because I think we can all benefit from it.
Well, I agree, Tony, and I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Let's wrap up with how can people reach out, connect with you, as well as purchase a copy of your book so that they can not only learn about digital transformation, but avoid some of these pitfalls and avoid all the disruption that potentially can come with that.
Thank you. So the easiest way to get to me is through my website, which is www.transformant.io. So that's Transformant as in the word transform and then the insect ant kind of mushed together in one word. And .io, which is India Oscar. And the book is available wherever books are sold, so online bookstores, Amazon. Again, the book's name is Why Digital Transformation Fail, and available in all kind of formats, audio, PDF, and hardcover.
Well, Tony, sounds wonderful. I will make sure to have the link to your site in the show notes, and thank you again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.